When you hear hoofbeats, don't expect to see a zebra. Turns out I have stripes. Welcome back to Zebra Life 24/7. My name is Holly, and this is episode 2 for the Zebra Journey, part 1 of 2. Today's episode will be the first part of my zebra journey, summarizing from the beginning until now. I've had so many simple, individual medical conditions occur ever since I can recall. I complained on and off as a child about a lot of physical pain and ailments. With a dad who moved around a lot, I never had a steady doctor I saw. It was just whoever was nearby. I don't remember a whole lot from my early childhood, but I have glimpses of things. I was 5, sitting in the church pew and kept complaining that my back hurt. It was hard to sit up. Of course, this was unacceptable, and I get it. He didn't know any better. I was born with an autoimmune and connective tissue disorder. It would take me 35 years to recognize that I had been living with these disorders my entire life. I was always a very physically active child, involved in multiple sports. I struggled more than most of my peers when it came to using my muscle strength, coordination, and lungs. My determination, accompanied with being raised by a Marine, allowed me to hide my differences and push through the discomfort. I struggled sitting still because I was always uncomfortable. I would wrap my legs around the legs of chairs to hold my body upright so my back wouldn't hurt. I battled with strep throat, ear infections, sinus infections, poor blood circulation, asthma, and GI issues since I was born. I would get car sick a lot and have horrible stomach pains. At 7, I was diagnosed with anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder and was put on medication. I spent multiple years in therapy. My parents went through a horrible divorce when I was 4, and I was put into some nasty situations, which will be covered in different episodes dealing with childhood trauma and parent loss. My issues were maddening, not just to myself, but for everyone around me. I was the girl who would wash her hands until they bled, brush her teeth 14 times a day, freak the F out if I had a tag on me or my socks fell down. I was a freak, but I got really good at finding ways to control it at school. I was in karate for 13 years. We all assumed that any pain or discomfort I had was from something I tweaked in karate. At 15, I was diagnosed with PCOS, IBS, GERD, tennis elbow, carpal tunnel syndrome, TMJ, stigmatisms in both eyes, and whatever else. I got used to being nauseous and puking all the time. Often, I wouldn't eat at school because I didn't want to feel sick. I had severe acne and was put on Accutane, which left deep scars. At 16, I went to the hospital because I was curled up in a ball on the floor in severe pain. A cyst had erupted. I went through episodes like this for years, just threw a heating pad on myself and tried to pass out. I also noticed increased joint pain in my teens. The doctors would just say, "Oh, it's probably from karate." At 18, I started seeing a chiropractor for my chronic neck and back pain. I pointed out how curved my neck and lower spine were, along with my over-rotated pelvis, and was always told it was nothing to worry about. Just the way that I am from being so flexible. I'd end up experiencing many strange things for my teenage years and onwards that always perplexed the doctors, but nothing would become of it. In my late teens, I had a stomach ulcer that just felt like appearing. I've probably thrown up well over 1,000 times in my life. Throwing up stomach acid is the worst. It takes all day or more to not feel that your throat is on fire. In my late teens and early 20s, I loved to work out, but it literally hurt my legs, feet, and knees all the time. My feet would always feel numb. My anxiety continued to increase. I could feel my heart racing all the time. I was told I hurt because I do too much. Okay, sure, I did. I worked 40 plus hours, went to school full time, and moved out of the house at 18, becoming as independent as I could. But for how many hours I had put in at the gym over the years, I shouldn't have been in that much pain. At 25, my left knee filled with so much fluid I couldn't walk. We had to drain it twice and do a cortisone injection. No one ever figured out what was wrong with me at the time. They felt that it might be a precursor for lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, and I would need to keep a close eye on it. I would experience cysts erupting, panic attacks, migraines, vomiting, and nausea 5 to 7 days a week, irregular and rapid heartbeats, dizzy low blood sugar spells, Raynaud's phenomenon, bone and joint pain, sleep paralysis, TMJ, sprains, strains, hip bursitis, and much, much more. Ever since I was a child, I could sleep and sleep and sleep, yet never feel rested. At 23 years old, my best friend pointed out a mole, like the only one on my body, on my shoulder, and said she thought it looked different. The dermatologist said it was nothing to worry about. But I had to remove it, and it was melanoma, stage 0. Caught it in time. My anxiety skyrocketed at this point in my life. The doctors were baffled that I could have this. One night, I thought my head was literally going to explode. Not like a migraine, but like so much pressure was going to burst through my skull. I went to the hospital and nothing showed up on the MRI. I had always struggled with my weight no matter how hard I worked out. I was extremely active, always. I was in boot camp at Lifetime when the personal trainer told me that he wasn't comfortable with me working out anymore until I had my heart tested. It didn't take much for me to pop up to 180 beats per minute, and I didn't feel out of breath. So I went to see a heart specialist. Everything came back fine. The ear infections and sinus infections continued to get worse as I got older. I saw 2 ENT specialists and had head and neck sinus scans. No one could tell me why I would get them, but because my anatomy was fine. There was no way to explain why this was happening. I got so familiar with the Minute Clinic that I never even got questioned when I went to see them with what I needed. After the first year, when they realized that I would tell them my ear was on the verge of going full blown, they didn't believe me because it only looked like there was a little fluid and in that it would resolve. That was a very annoying year because I had to wait an extra 20 hours so it could go from A to Z that quick. And of course, it was always in both ears. So it was nice when I could just start popping by and getting what I needed without being looked at like I was crazy. I was told by a top-of-the-line endocrinologist that I wasn't ovulating and would not be able to have kids. Well, thank my lucky stars and God that I am blessed with 3 perfect boys. My pregnancies were rough. I mean, horribly painful. It all started with the progesterone that I needed to take because I produced so little. The second time I got pregnant, I found out at 12 weeks I had miscarried around 8 weeks. I was given something to help expel the fetus. I was in intense pain and ended up having an emergency D&C. I had a posterior placenta with every pregnancy. Not unusual, except to have it every time. It essentially just made me carry everything a bit differently. I developed one of the most painful things I have, at least up to that point, ever experienced: symphysis pubis disorder. My ligaments were extremely loose, which caused my bones to separate further than normal. This sucked. Imagine being pregnant and having your pubic bones, pelvis, feel like it was going to snap right off whenever you turned or put weight on it. Supposedly, the upside to this was going to be that my labor should go pretty fast. Yeah, every one of my boys was around 36 hours. They wouldn't engage on their own. My last one had so much fluid that he literally flipped in my stomach up until she could safely break my water without causing him to become entangled in the cord. I was at the hospital multiple times thinking that I was going into labor. I'm not talking about Braxton Hicks. My contractions were considered true contractions. They showed up on the monitor and it would be consistent for hours at a time. I had what's called predominal labor with all of my pregnancies. My last one, that lasted for a few months. Predominal labor is basically between Braxton Hicks and active labor. Because I am stubborn when it comes to physically and mentally being able to take everything that comes my way, my dumb self waited for 20 plus hours into the active labor phase of each kid to finally get an epidural. Of course, my epidurals weren't fully effective, so that was fun. My boys never dropped. I pushed through every stage. Now it makes sense why I was always saying it felt like they were pushing right on my bone and actually underneath it, like getting stuck. Turns out I happen to have a tilted pelvis, backwards hip socket, and a cam and pincer deformity. Recovering after pregnancy always seems to be extra difficult for me. After my last, I went back in and they treated me for endometriosis. After my first pregnancy is when I noticed more and more strange things happening. I was losing a lot of hair. Thankfully, I have a lot to start with, and was told it was from stress of post-pregnancy. I would have a lot more near fainting episodes, meaning I would stand up and all of a sudden get extremely lightheaded and just felt strange. My knees would buckle and I would become super shaky, nauseous, and dizzy. My skin would become sticky and I would start to sweat. Usually I could eventually get this to go away with a quick sugar intake. Yes, I know it sounds like a diabetic thing, but trust me, I've had those tests multiple times for years. Everything was normal. My back pain got worse and it always felt as if I had a jacked up tailbone. I got sent for an MRI, perfectly normal. I would still go through insane temperature changes. I just couldn't regulate my body whatsoever. I'd be freezing my employees out at work while sweating, yet at the same time my extremities were ice cold. My hips are only warm to the touch after a hot bath, and lately that doesn't even happen. My normal body temperature is between 96.7 and 97.3 degrees. I honestly don't think I've ever had a fever since I was in middle school. I stopped explaining things to the doctors in my early 20s because their answers were always the same. I thought that I must just be more sensitive or had bad anxiety or things were all in my head. So that's all I have for you today. Stay tuned for weekly episodes of Zebra Life 24/7 airing at 3:30 p.m. every Saturday. Episode 3 will be the continuation of my personal journey as a medical zebra. Please click the subscribe button below and remember, perception is your reality.